Imagine, if you will, a fun night out in a trendy gay bar in San Francisco in 1974. You feel a freedom to be yourself in a place where you belong, surrounded by others who understand and support you. Then, a handsome stranger approaches you and introduces himself as a cartoonist. He says he's noticed you from across the room and hands you a little portrait he made of you on a napkin. You're swooned and you enjoy some drinks and dancing with your new friend before he finally convinces you to go somewhere a little more private. It's not until your body is found buried in the brush that you realize you've come to Lover's Lane with a serial killer. This is the case of the unsolved murders of Gerald Cavanaugh, Joseph Jae Stevens, Klaus Christmann, Frederick Capin, Harald Gullberg, Warren Andrews, and the other unnamed victims of the Doodler Killer. Listener discretion is advised. Hello, welcome to the Lost Souls of America podcast. I'm your host, Jamie, and joining us tonight is our beautiful producer, Amelia. Hi, Amelia.
Hi, Jamie. How are you today?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I am well, too. Did you know the day after this episode comes out will be 5 years that I have been running my business, and I'm very proud of it. So,
oh my gosh,
a shout out!
Happy anniversary!
Thanks.
Hey, did you watch The Staircase yet?
Okay.
I'm just kidding. It's fine. It's fine.
Here's the thing. No, here's the thing. I made an effort to watch it. So first of all, we don't have HBO, so I couldn't watch HBO. And then I went to watch.
I'll slip you my login if I can figure out what it is. I have no clue.
Okay, so then I go on Netflix, which I do have. And girl, you didn't tell me it is 13 episodes, and each episode is 45 minutes. And I'm like, I don't have like 11 hours in the next week to watch this.
No, that's. I understand.
So I got one of those TVs where you can like talk into the remote and it just figures it all out for you. And so I talked into my remote and I was like, Staircase. And it came up with a 3-part series on investigation discovery.
Interesting.
And I watched most of that.
Cool. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to look for that. Maybe I'll watch that too, just so I can say I've seen all of it, right?
Yeah.
You know, what's funny is I think I saw that on Investigation Discovery and skimmed over it because I think I thought it was the same one that I had already seen. Why would you name your documentary the same documentary as somebody else's documentary about the same thing?
Oh, that happens a lot.
That's dumb.
Yeah, it's very common.
In my opinion. So, okay, so then we'll talk about it. We'll wait till you finish to talk about it. Okay. What about you? Do you have any cases on your heart or anything that you want to share with us?
I do. This case is not only on my heart, Jamie, but it is on our dear listener, Molly's heart. She reached out to us. Hi, Molly. She is an avid listener.
Hi, Molly.
Hey, we appreciate you so much. She listens to every single episode of our show. She comments on every episode and she shares it. So thank you, Molly. And she reached out to us in the last week to tell us about the case of Pamela Winchester. So on March 23rd, 2022, 61-year-old Pamela Winchester was traveling alone from her residence in Elizabethtown, Illinois, to Mitchell, Indiana. She called a family member in Mitchell at around 5:30 a.m. and advised that she had stopped in Henderson, Kentucky. Her vehicle is a gray 2002 Ford Taurus with Illinois veterans plates, and the car was found in the parking lot of the Circle K truck stop at 3113 US 41 North. This is the last confirmed sighting of Pamela Winchester. Her phone has been shut off since then, and her family has not heard one word from her at all. Okay, so Molly, who reached out to us with this, she actually used to work at that truck stop. So she knows a ton of people in the area. She's super dedicated to this case. She's been really involved. She's been helping search the woods. She's been putting up flyers. So according to Molly, Pamela left her car and her purse behind. And the last video they have of her is her walking back towards the parking lot where the truck drivers park. And so that's located right in front of this trailer park there. The camera footage they got at the truck stop wasn't awesome, but it showed that she walked in the front door and she parked in the front lot. She went into the bathroom and then she took the back door out. So that's the total opposite side of the building of where she came in.
Yeah, that's weird. Why would you do that, right? If your
Really
car was
weird.
on one side?
So the cameras caught her going behind the store and walked towards the access road in front of a row of trucks. She walks right past a camera and then that's it. She's never been seen again. It's like she totally disappeared into the night. Apparently, there are a lot of missing women in Kentucky, and a lot of those women go missing in truck stops. Could it be like a drug deal? Could it have been she had met up with someone like online or something? Or could it be like a serial killer? Like if multiple women are missing from truck stops? Because that's pretty common. A lot of serial killers are truck drivers.
Yeah.
So Pamela Winchester is a 61-year-old white female. She's 5 feet 1 inch tall, weighs 130 pounds, and has shoulder-length brown and gray hair. She was last seen wearing glasses, blue jeans, and a gray hooded sweatshirt. Anyone with any information about Pamela Winchester is asked to call the Henderson Police Department at 270-831-1295. And again, the last time she was seen was March 23rd of this year.
That's crazy. And she's not from there, right? She was just passing through on a road trip?
Exactly. Yes. Right. She's from Illinois.
And she had called somebody at 5:30 that morning to say like, hey, just stopping at a truck stop and then I'll be on my next leg of the trip. And then she's gone.
Gone.
And that's an odd time too. You know what I mean? Like I would imagine that's
5:30 a.m. Yeah.
So I'm sure whenever anybody goes missing, right? One of the theories is like, did they run away on purpose? And which, I would imagine there might be some credence to that with her walking out the back door. But like, why would you call your family member and say, hey, I'm on my way. I'm just making this stop. If you were going to run away, it doesn't make any sense. You wouldn't run away on a road trip.
Why would you run away without your car? Like,
right. And even if she was, yeah. And if she was meeting up with somebody, like that's an odd time and a place to meet up with somebody on the internet.
I don't know. I don't want to speculate too much. I guess I have some theories, but I really don't want to like.
Yeah. That's fair enough. My immediate thought was more like trafficking.
Yeah, which it absolutely could be.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us, Molly. We'll keep you in our prayers. Keep us posted. We will stay attuned, apprised. What's the word I'm looking for to that story?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
Aware?
We'll follow it. Yeah, there you go. Good enough. You all know what I meant. Okay, so tonight we're going to talk about the Doodler who plagued San Francisco in 1974 and 1975. I know, Amelia, that you're into serial killers.
Mm-hmm.
Are you ready to hear all about the Doodler?
I am very ready to hear all about the Doodler.
As interested in this story as I am in these cases, I am looking forward to never having to say the Doodler again after today.
Yeah. Unless he gets caught.
Yeah, then I'll say the Doodler over and over. Okay.
Yeah.
So before we get too into tonight's story, I think it's important to kind of time travel back to the early 70s a little bit for a moment and set the stage for you. Now, as much unrest and inequality as there is still in the world today, we have made some progress, and we need to remind ourselves of what it was really like to be LGBTQ+ living in San Francisco in 1974. San Francisco had become a hub for the gay rights movement. The city supervisor was legendary openly gay politician Harvey Milk, so many people were becoming more outspoken and vocally demanding their equal rights. As we know, this sometimes caused dangerous backlash for the people who were willing to be loud about it, whether their physical safety was at risk or their livelihood through being ostracized. For many, coming out and standing up for their rights wasn't a risk that they felt like they could take. In fact, Harvey Milk himself was assassinated for his progressive beliefs right inside City Hall in 1978. It was estimated that San Francisco housed around 85,000 gay men at the time, and still up to 25% of them were not out of the closet. Another important thing to note is that being gay wasn't just societally frowned upon. There were actually laws attempting to prevent it in any way possible. Beyond the equality laws that we're still fighting for today, marriage, equal rights, those things, gay relationships, which included sex, were actually considered a punishable offense. You could be arrested. Sodomy laws weren't repealed in San Francisco until 1976, which meant that while this killer was hunting in the gay bars, patrons also had to worry about the police just busting in and breaking up the party, something which could and did happen. The LGBTQ community felt little safety and support from the police.
Just as like a note, because I know, especially we always kind of talk about this stuff, like we've come so far, we're on the right track, but there's still a lot of work to do. They repealed their sodomy laws. What'd you say? 1976?
76.
76. There are still 16 states in the United States that still have sodomy laws in 2022.
Amelia, stop it.
I swear to God. And it's awful.
That's really awful. It's the sodomy. That's the dumb. Oh my God. Oh my God. So stupid. So stupid. That makes me upset. Being gay in the 70s in San Francisco made you vulnerable in a number of alarming ways. But perhaps the most mysterious of these threats is the man known today as the Doodler Killer. He was also known as the Black Doodler. It's believed he murdered anywhere between 6 and 16 people, though some believe there may have been more victims in other locations as well. The first known victim of the Doodler Killer was a 49-year-old blue-collar factory worker and Canadian immigrant named Gerald Cavanaugh. It took quite some time for his body to be identified, and he was initially listed as a John Doe, likely because he was unmarried with little connections. Through diligent investigative reporting by Kevin Fagan, we've learned that he was also a World War II vet with the U.S. Army. He visited his mother once a year, but in general, his family was not aware that he was gay, likely because they self-identified as, quote, very Catholic. He'd been found fully clothed, face up in the sand on Ocean Beach near a popular hookup spot on January 27th, 1974, in the early morning hours. His body had to be dragged from the shoreline, nearly washed out to sea. He'd been stabbed 17 times, both in the front and in the back, in what seemed like it could only be a fit of pure rage. Authorities believed he'd died within hours of when he was found, and that he'd been conscious at the time of his death, and that he'd fought back hard against his killer, as evidenced by several defensive wounds. 5 months later, a woman walking along Spreckles Lake Beach came upon the recently deceased body of Joseph Jae Stevens. Stevens was a 27-year-old and had been working locally as a female impersonator and comedian. He was 6'2" and muscular, didn't drink alcohol to keep his wits about him, and did a killer Julie Andrews under his stage name Jay. He could sing, dance, and his friends described him as a really good stand-up comic in a dress. He was described as attractive, charming, gregarious, and well-spoken. Despite his high-level performances on stage, off-stage he was shy and humble, easily embarrassed, quiet and modest, and preferred to live as a man. He had publicly come out when he was drafted into the military, and though his family had a hard time with it at first, he was eventually accepted and celebrated by them for who he was, even sharing performances with his sister Michelle. It was the morning after a performance at the Cabaret Club in North Beach that his body was found stabbed so brutally that his family barely recognized him. Stevens was a well-loved local, born and raised in San Francisco, and his death simply agonized the LGBTQ community. It agonized his family even more. In her deep grief, Stevens' sister Alma suffered a psychotic break, And just 3 months after her brother's murder, she savagely murdered her own mother and another remaining sister with a sledgehammer. The poor woman was institutionalized, and the family has never recovered from the unspeakable back-to-back tragedies. Then, less than 2 weeks after the discovery of Joseph Stevens' body, another woman was walking her dog on Ocean Beach, where Gerald Cavanaugh had been found at the beginning of the year. She stumbled upon another stabbing victim, Klaus Christmann, a German immigrant who was 31 years old and a married father of 2. He'd been staying with an American friend since April. Though he was not publicly out as gay, his daughter has since stated that she always knew he was hiding something about his sexuality. So San Francisco was a good fit for him to explore what that meant, while also exploring new employment opportunities for himself. He was just hoping for a chance at what he thought would be the American dream. He was last seen partying at a bar named Bojangles in the Tenderloin district. When his body was recovered on Ocean Beach, he had been stabbed even more than the other victims. This time, the killer had added slashing his throat in as an apparent act of overkill, nearly decapitating the man. He was fully clothed, though his pants were unzipped and open. The next May of 1975, in nearly the same location as Cavanaugh and Christmann, the body of Frederick Capin was found stabbed 16 times on the beach. Capin was a 32-year-old decorated war veteran who worked locally as a nurse. He was considered a hero who had fought off the enemy to save several of his fellow soldiers and earned commendations for his bravery. He was also described as a talented artist who had his pieces on display in several bars in the neighborhoods near his home. In a cruel twist of irony, his family had recently been asking to come for a visit, but Capin had told them that it was too dangerous of a time with the crime and serial killers in the community. Investigators believe that perhaps he'd been lured to the sand dunes by his killer that night for a private moment together. In the autopsy, it was noted that there was blood smeared all over his feet and hands, something not noted in the other autopsies. Perhaps that was also a result of his fighting back like the others. A few weeks later, in June of 1975, a 5th victim was located buried under the brush of the 16th hole of the Lincoln Park golf course near Ocean Beach. He was badly decomposed, and authorities believed he'd been there approximately 2 weeks. He was the oldest of the victims, and it took some time before he was identified as 66-year-old Harald Gullberg, a Swedish immigrant. He was never married and had no family, so not much was known about him. Unlike the other cases, his underwear appeared to have been taken by the killer, and a handkerchief was left behind. According to original homicide investigators Rtea Guilford and Earl Sanders, who had interviewed many witnesses in the local bar scene, the killer would flatter his victims with drawings of them in an effort to lure them for sex. He'd sit sipping his drink in a corner, drawing pictures of animals to impress the people he'd meet, oftentimes even drawing their likeness on a napkin. To the men who chose to leave with him, this must have come across as a charming and romantic gesture. They never suspected they were sneaking away to their tragic ends. Police believed he frequented the bars in the area of San Francisco known as the Castro, the Tenderloin, and Polk Street, spots that had previously felt like little safe havens for the LGBTQ community. There are areas that had some affordable housing projects, which really helped someone who might be single and estranged from family to be able to make it on their own in the world. Now it was this vulnerable population that the Doodler had made his ample target. By the time summer of 1975 came around, the Doodler was beginning to make some mistakes, namely leaving his victims alive. Though there's not a lot of information available on these crimes, there were at least 3 surviving victims of the Doodler who came forward to police to share their stories. The first victim says he encountered the Doodler at 2 a.m. when the bar was closing for the night and they all made their way to a diner called the Truck Stop. The man never told his name, but the victim invited him over for some alone time at his swanky apartment building. When they arrived, the Doodler locked himself in the bathroom for a lengthy time, and when he finally came out, he attacked. The victim had his back turned when he was stabbed repeatedly from behind. The steak knife the attacker was using broke, and he fled, leaving his victim harmed but alive. Astonishingly, 2 weeks later, the Doodler returned to the scene of the crime, the same building, and knocked on the door of another resident. Though it's unclear if he was attempting to finish what he started but made a mistake on the apartment door, or if he was seeking a new victim. He convinced the man who opened to let him in under the guise of using his phone. Once inside, he bound the man's hands and feet, but the victim fought back, yelling and banging as loudly as he could. The commotion attracted security, and the Doodler snuck out of the building, making another escape. In both of these cases, the victims say that the man repeated, "You guys are all alike." The third failed attempt was on a man who met the Doodler at a bar before inviting him back to his house. Once in the bedroom, the killer dropped a concealed knife from the sleeve of his jacket. It's unclear to me how the escape was made from there, but the Doodler fled and the victim made it out unharmed. All three victims were terrified and wanted to be anonymous, but they all approached the police with as much cooperation as they were able to. With their help, a composite sketch was created and circulated. The Doodler was described as young, approximately maybe 19 to 23, African American, tall and lanky, with a narrow face and high-set cheekbones. His eyes were described as wide set with a calm look. That sketch was distributed first in the Centennial, the local queer newspaper at the time, and then eventually in the San Francisco Chronicle. It did actually generate some leads. A psychologist came forward, which, by the way, this was actually after his secretary called the police multiple times to report it, but was not taken seriously. And he said that he'd seen a patient that he believed to be the Doodler, that this man had confessed to the killings and looked a lot like the sketch. This man had also told the psychologist that he was struggling with feelings of his own sexual identity, which actually fit the behavioral profile of the killer and his extreme rage towards his victims. His own sexual identity was probably something he felt a lot of self-hatred about. In 1975, an amendment to the patient privacy laws allowed the psychologist to share this man's name with investigators, as he believed that he posed an imminent threat to the public. This person of interest was interviewed extensively and is reported to have been cooperative, though never admitted to any involvement. He admitted that he did say he struggled with his sexuality, but they had a girlfriend now, so he was feeling much better. He was watched from a distance for a long time, but of course, ultimately, there was nothing he could be charged with, and his name has never been released. Investigators believe that the Doodler may have had up to 16 victims total, local to San Francisco at the time. Reporter Kevin Fagan has taken a deep dive on this story in the last handful of years, writing a series of articles for the San Francisco Chronicle, which, by the way, are really good. I literally paid for a subscription to the San Francisco Chronicle so that I could continue reading these articles. I'm not kidding. He also has a podcast called The Doodler. I have not listened to it yet, but I really can't wait to. I'm looking forward to getting into it. Anyway, according to his own research and interest, he believes that it's possible or even probable that the Doodler Killer moved on and had more victims in other parts of the country. That very suspect from the psychologist report allegedly left town on a lengthy road trip himself, and it's believed that his whereabouts do coincide with some similar unsolved murders. But since they're all still open investigations, no one of any official authority is talking much about those connections. So why has catching the Doodler been such a monumental task? We'd think surely with this much evidence and witness reports, we could find this guy. Unfortunately, that's where we have to go back to the state of gay culture in San Francisco at the time. It's reported in several sources that the first surviving witness was actually a foreign diplomat, and that the third surviving witness was reported to be a well-known American actor. In both of their cases, the men stood a lot to lose by being publicly outed in such dramatic fashions. And for both of them, the fear of testifying outweighed the fear they had of the killer. Though they cooperated with the police, they absolutely refused to testify. And they've spent all the years following the events in complete anonymity, though many have speculated on their identities. We also have to take into consideration the crime culture in California in the 70s when we had a surge of horrific serial killings.
Yeah, big time.
You were shaking your head. I was like, here we go. Here comes Amelia. She's going to know.
A whole bunch.
Yeah. So the fear of this terrible type of crime was alive and well already, thanks to the Zodiac killer, which, by the way, is still unsolved, who had targeted couples and the media alike with his chilling series of coded letters sent to the San Francisco Chronicle in the 60s. We also had the Santa Rosa hitchhiker killer in 1972, who had murdered several young women and still has never been caught. Then in 1973, a new serial killer group calling themselves the Death's Angels began targeting the African American community in the Bay Area with insane random shootings. It's rumored that due to the seemingly random threat, all police communications about this case were to be done exclusively on the Z channel. And so they were officially dubbed the Zebra Killers. The Doodler began his target of the San Francisco gay community in January of 1974. And within days of Gerald Cavanaugh's body being discovered, both the Zebra Killers and the Zodiac Killer had struck again, completely overshadowing the investigation into the Doodler from the start. By the time his killings had established a pattern that the police could recognize, it became completely swallowed up again by the Golden State Killer, now known as Joseph DeAngelo, who started his spree in 1975. So you can see how the combination of the need for anonymity clashed with the media's opportunities to promote those who were eager to share their stories. A lot of the victims of the other killers were middle-class white couples whose families were ready to take up the fight for them. But many gay male victims of violent crimes, that just was not a luxury they had. Further, many of the LGBTQ community members had a massive distrust of the police, strengthened only by the fact that they felt the police did not seem to care at all about these murders of this underserved population.
I was just going to say that too. I mean, that's probably the biggest part. I mean, never mind that these people aren't talking. I mean, you have, children victims and things. We can't know their name and hear their stories, but this still gets out. But I mean, if you're gay, it's 1970. You put this, I hate to say this. I do not feel this way. I hate to say this, but you put this in the paper, a lot of people are going to say good, which is disgusting. Right. But, that was the time.
Yeah. It was considered so sinful back then that, I'm sure a lot of people felt like it was, including police. I'm sure a lot of the police, they were the ones that were going in the bars and busting up these people minding their own damn business.
Right.
Arresting them, charging them with sodomy.
I mean, we think about this over 50 years ago, but we have those two women in Utah who were just killed for being gay this year.
Right. Kylan and Crystal. Yeah.
Awful.
And unfortunately, without cooperation from the surviving victims and without any solid evidence that could conclusively link a suspect, the police have thus far still been unable to close the case. But apparently things are looking up a little bit in the investigation. In 2018, San Francisco police investigator Dan Cunningham was put in charge of the cold case unit and brought the Doodler case back into the light. His team had an artist rework and re-release the witness sketch with an age progression. That's genius. You don't see that very often. You see the age progression on the victims done when people are missing, but it's not seen often in killers. He says there were actually 2 DNA samples that have been sent in, but so far there are no matches. Cunningham says that they're closer than ever to connecting all the dots and closing the investigation. In fact, investigator Cunningham's newly renewed efforts combined with Kevin Fagan's investigative journalism have led to a huge break in this case recently in 2022, which is what brought this to our attentions and why we're covering this tonight. SFPD recently made an announcement that they've added a 6th victim to the official tally. Though the Doodler is suspected to have killed maybe as many as 16 victims that we know of, 52-year-old attorney Warren Andrews was found clinging tenuously to life beneath some brush near a popular hookup spot for local gay men on April 27th of 1975. He'd been beaten severely with a rock and a tree branch. Though he fought for 7 weeks, he was never able to regain consciousness and he died of his injuries in the hospital. Because the murder weapon didn't fit the Doodler's main method of killing, the pattern was initially missed, and investigators believed it to be unrelated. Other similarities in the victimology, though, are said to reveal the connections between the killings. So the investigators now believe that the killer's knife was probably tossed off nearby cliffs during his attack on Andrews, as Andrews was fighting back, and that the rock and branch became weapons of necessity. When investigators called Andrew's sister in 2021 to break the announcement, she had never even heard of the Doodler. But she says that she's grateful for the renewed attention. Investigator Cunningham also says that the same man they spoke of before, who was brought forward by the psychologist, is still the main person of interest all these years later. Police have even re-interviewed him and say that he accidentally left his DNA for them to compare in the future. But I'm assuming that means it has not matched to anything so far. Now, with advances in technology, I think everyone is hopeful that this will finally be the year that the man who terrorized the gay men of San Francisco in the 70s will be brought to justice. Amelia, do you have any final thoughts for us tonight?
Just that it's really sad. I feel like that's always my thought. My thought's always like, yeah, this sucks. No, but it is. But, I feel like it sounds like a long time ago and we might think this never gets solved, but the Golden State Killer got solved within the last 5 years. So same time period. So it could get solved. This person could still be alive. Maybe.
So police think that he is. I don't know what I don't know what led them to this conclusion, but in the call to action that we're going to share tonight, the police did say that they have reason to believe that the Doodler is still probably alive and probably living openly as a gay man, maybe even in San Francisco to this day.
I almost wonder if they're just tracking that one guy this whole time, because as times change, 50 years later, they're like, oh, wait, that doesn't make any sense that it wouldn't be him just because now he had a girlfriend.
Right. I mean, I don't think
like
they
that's
really
your
bought
defense. Oh my God.
Yeah. I don't think they bought his excuse either. He's like, no, I know I said I was conflicted in my sexuality, but I have a girlfriend now. It's fine. Okay.
All right.
Because that never happens.
Okey-dokey.
Yeah. Yeah. So I also, the other part of that sticks out to me is one of the sources that I read said that they thought that the diplomat was still alive and well. People have tried to figure out who these anonymous victims are, the survivors. The celebrity one, the actor one, kind of makes me laugh because there's a lot, people think it's a pretty famous. People want to believe that it was someone pretty famous. There were a lot of actors back in the day who were not out of the closet that would sneak over to the San Francisco community. I think Cary Grant's one of the people that have been named as a potential.
I'm sure there are actors today who are still doing that.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, totally. And so he didn't want to, testify for obvious reasons. And then the diplomat, they say that he's still a diplomat in San Francisco. That's what some of the sources believe.
Well,
but here's my question, because one of the sources I read said that the person they believe to be the diplomat is living openly gay lifestyle now at this point in his life, which if that were the case, why wouldn't you come forward now? I'm sure the statute of limitations on his assault is gone, but there's no statute of limitations on murder.
You don't know who he was with at that time. Could he have been married to a woman then? Would that have brought something up? Maybe he doesn't want to relive it.
Yeah, all valid points. All right, you want to know what my final thought is?
Yeah.
I think it's the guy that they think it is.
I do too.
And I think that the sketch, which I will put the updated one on our website as well. I think that's probably pretty close to like a direct portrait of the guy. There were tons of witnesses.
Yeah.
Not only the surviving victims, but all the people at the bar.
Yeah. It's crazy they haven't gotten him yet.
I know. What needs to happen? What I wonder what. Here's my only hang up on that is I don't know. None of the sources that I used got really deep into what DNA evidence they have. And I'm guessing that's because the police have not revealed, not because we don't know. But how come it's not matched up so far? Like if they have this guy's DNA and they have this evidence, why hasn't it matched up yet? I guess it depends what they have. And I guess it depends. This is a thing that I've learned since doing this podcast of whether, because if it's semen, that's different than if it's blood, than if it's sweat. And I guess it depends if he was a secretor or a non-secretor, right? Because remember, we learned that about some of your stuff might not secrete your type.
Yeah. So it probably was semen. And maybe they have it, but maybe this guy hasn't been arrested before. Maybe they have it, but no one in this guy's family has submitted to 23andMe or whatever it is.
Yeah, no, but the person of interest, they have his DNA. The guy that the psychologist reported, because when they reopened the case in 2018, when the cold case unit took it, they re-interviewed him and they didn't say what it was. They said that he, quote, accidentally, but I'm sure they gave him a drink and he left the cup there, or something like that. They said he accidentally left his DNA, which they have on file for the future. That's how the article put it.
Did you say that before? Am I like a lunatic?
I did say that before, but as discussed, you're pregnant and don't remember anything.
I don't remember anything.
I don't know if I described it in that much vivid detail, but I did say that they had his interview. I mean, that they got his DNA at the interview.
Dang it.
So that's my only hang up. Like, I'm confused by that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's a mystery.
It is a mystery.
It's yet another mystery. We talk about a lot of those around here on our podcast about unsolved cases. Who'd have thunk it? Hey, Amelia, is there an organization that you want to share with everyone tonight before we do our call to action for the Doodler?
There are a few organizations I want to share because it's Pride Month and we're talking about this. So is the Trevor Project. Their mission is to end suicide among lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and questioning young people. They offer crisis counseling, peer support for anyone under 25. When I was actually on their website recently, I saw they're looking for counselors right now. They'll train you. The only thing you need is to be able to commit to 3 hours once a week for a year. That seems doable.
For volunteers?
Yeah, to be a crisis counselor with them and help save some people and make them feel good. The next is for the LGBT National Youth Hotlines. That's anyone under 23. It's free and confidential peer support. And their website is glbthotline.com. Their number is 800-246-7743. There's truecolors.united.org when they help give support to homeless LGBTQ plus people who are disproportionately affected by homelessness. And then here's the big one. And this is the one I really want to asterisk around for everybody. And that's WEAVE. WEAVE Crisis Intervention for Domestic Violence and Sex Trafficking / Sexual Assault, which again, disproportionately affects LGBTQA people. And it's also less talked about. And as Jamie, you and I always talk about on the show, sex trafficking isn't talked about enough in any form, no matter who it is.
Yeah.
But it's especially not talked about in this community. So all of WEAVE services can be accessed by calling the support and information line. It's 24 hours, and you'll have immediate intervention and support by trained peer counselors. Help is available in 23 languages.
Wow, that's great.
Very great. Really cool. So their website is Weave, WEAVE, Inc.org. Their phone number is 916-920-9999. 9252. So if you are listening to this and you're confused or not accepted by your family or going through a really hard time or whatever, you can call those places. Help is definitely available because unfortunately, not only are gay and trans people at a higher risk of violent crime, they're also at a significantly higher risk of suicide. And no one should think they're better off dead than being who they are. So if you need help or if you know someone who needs help, share it with them. Share it on your social media. Someone you might not know needs that help and access to those resources. So I'll be sure to be putting these in our show notes for the rest of the month, and we'll have it on our website.
I love what you just said at the end the most, because just in my everyday day job, I post a lot of like, I don't know, stupid inspirational quotes, yada, yada. But I get messages from people that are like, you have no idea how much I needed to hear that. Right. And I'm like, I was talking about something dumb. Imagine if somebody who needed to see that saw that just because you took 2 seconds of your time and shared. You might never even know that you saved a life.
Absolutely.
And thank you for bringing that to our attention, Amelia, because I have never even heard of Weave, and I'm going to go look it up right now.
Yeah. And anyone listening, if you want to be an ally and you have 3 spare hours every week, consider becoming a crisis counselor. I know people who volunteered not for Trevor Project, but for the National Suicide Hotline, and they find it very rewarding. So it's something to consider.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, friend, would you like to read the call to action, or should I?
You can. I'm getting tongue-tied tonight.
I know. And your little baby boy is like sitting right on you.
Right on my diet. Yeah, I'm so sorry. I feel like I'm like just breathing into this microphone like crazy tonight.
I mean, I can see your face, so I can see the face that you're making when you do it. Yeah. But I don't think you can hear it too much. Investigators believe that the killer may still be living as an openly gay man in the San Francisco Bay Area, never having faced justice. Please take a look at and distribute the updated aged sketch. Anyone with information on this case or with possible leads can contact the homicide cold case investigator Daniel Cunningham at 1-415-553-9515 or email him at daniel.cunningham@sfgov.org. If you would like to remain anonymous, you may call the San Francisco Police Department tip line at 1-415-575-4444 or text a tip to 847-411. That is all we have for you tonight. Thank you for listening. You can find shareable content on our social media at Lost Souls of America and our website, lostsoulsofamerica.com. Please share often and help spread awareness for their cases. These are the stories of the voiceless. These are the lost souls of America.